When midnight swept over New Saigon, the city glimmered with latticework neon amber, cerulean, mauve, weaving through the glass veins of skyscrapers and moonlit alleys. But beneath the familiar electric tides, time fractured. A heartbeat, 10 seconds, then everything snapped back, rewound, and played forward again. The coffee in cups steamed untouched. Cars repeated their turn on the avenue. Air thickened as repetition echoed through every laugh, every sigh, every unspoken secret. Memory struggled in the loops, and reality itself blurred at the edges. For most, the rewinds ran unseen. People went about their business, blind to their own duplication, caught in the rhythms of repetition, as if the future and past danced upon their shoulders. But not everyone was so anonymous in time. Some remembered what came before, what repeated at the epicenter of the impossible loop. Shadows moved with purpose. In a narrow alley near Ben Thanh Market, Tien crouched behind a rack of knockoff hover jackets. The smell of fried taro and engine oil thickened the air. Crowds surged and retreated, faces stretched by the neon's watery light. He checked the watch slipped from his father's wrist, a battered analog, luminous dial. In 10 seconds, the thunderclap would hit. He felt the pull, every atom shuddering at the edge. Tien was a time refugee. Most in the city didn't see him, didn't notice that his face bore the blank, haunted stare of those who ran from history, not just from place. He had crossed boundaries no map could trace, carrying memories no calendar could bind. And now, anchored in the endless rewind, he searched for a ghost, one person in New Saigon rumored to understand such cracks in reality. A quantum detective, Tien's breath misted in the tropical night as the world repeated yet again. The echo thudded in his chest, a rhythm too regular, too endless. Footsteps approached, the signature click of reinforced carbon heels on whetstone, cadence deliberate as clockwork. Tien tensed, clutching the battered watch, his mind racing through fractured timelines and warnings. The detective, if the rumors held, could see that edge between before and after. She was the metaphysical shovel digging through the sediments of time. Tien, isn't it? The voice came from behind a cascade of radiant umbrella light. She stepped through it, coat slung low, gleaming with tiny quantum keys. It shimmered oddly, throwing fractal flashes onto the rain-smeared plasteel tiles. Tien managed a nod, shoulders tight, pockets, as if they could anchor her to the city's bruised geometry. The woman's eyes caught his, luminous, black-rimmed in phosphor blue, with a gaze more analytic than human. "I'm right," Tien replied, forcing a hint of a smile. "You're Ashlyn, aren't you?" Ashlyn's smile was irreverent, sharp as the edge of her coat. "You expected me to be taller," she replied, voice husky with amusement and hidden weariness. "That's how they describe me in the files, like a shadow casting itself over lesser things." She pivoted, the umbrella device floating at her hip, emitting real-time field harmonics that flickered against the chemical haze. The market tunnel behind them pulsed with foot traffic. Water sellers hunkered in the neon underglow, reciting price lists in half a dozen dialects. A cluster of synth kids danced near the old monorail arch, faces painted with code fragments and hope. Tien didn't answer. He followed Ashlyn's gaze out past the bottleneck, toward the perimeter shield, where the city's containment interface warped the night into electric veins. Above, the domed sky was bruised, an artificial aurora, flickering, malfunctioning since the previous cycle. Ashlyn's voice snapped him back. "You had the data module. You carry Corin's sigil. You pinged the chemist node 2 hours ago. Who else knows?" "No one," said Tien. "I was careful." Ashlyn's lips twisted, skeptical. She stepped closer, her coat catching in the rush of artificial wind. "Careful isn't enough. The indexers have predictive algorithms for careful. We're moving." Her left hand twitched, signaling some silent protocol Tien couldn't decipher. The two slipped through the crowd, heading east into the lower sections, past the red valve and memory curve, where the city's surface codes peeled into oxidized confusion. An old drone blinked from the ductwork, watchful. with a recognition flash that told Ashlyn it wouldn't raise the alarm. She led Tien to a narrow breach behind a reclaimer's stall, ducking through a fire-damaged hatch, down a stairwell lit only by the faded phosphor of long-dead advertisements. Their footsteps echoed against the rust-chewed stringers, each step reverberating through the hollow bones of the understructure. Down here, the settlement's cacophony faded to a velvet hush, replaced by the tense pulse of unseen machines and the distant hush of water. The air thickened with damp rot and the subtle tang of ozone minute drifts from the scavenger nets strung far above. Hester paused before a corroded steel door, layers of graffiti etched across it, old council sigils, memorial tags for the lost, and newer curse symbols. She pressed her thumb to a barely visible contact plate. The door jutted open, just wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. Tien squeezed after her, pulse rushing, senses pricked for threats, friend and foe alike. Inside, the room was unexpectedly spacious, containing a mosaic of scavenged tech in faded luxuries, a battered hololith projector beamed fractured colors onto a rain-rotted plank floor. Shelves lined 3 of the walls, crowded with bins of circuit boards, ancient power cells, and bundles of tightly bound optical cable. A battered recliner sat next to a handcrafted work table, where a squat figure hunched over a shimmering piece of machinery. Solder smoke drifting through her hair. "Ma," Hester called, voice pitched low but urgent. The woman looked up. Her face was a map of old burns and smile lines, her eyes dark behind magnifier lenses. She flicked off her tool and set it aside with the gentle reverence reserved for fragile relics. "Tien," Hester gestured. "Meet my mother, Arkina." Arkina extended one hand, palm blackened from years of work. Tien shook it, nerves tightening. Arkina's gaze lingered, sharp as a tool edge. "Not many outsiders end up here," Arkina said quietly, appraising. "You must be desperate." Tien hesitated. "I'm looking for the remnants of the Red Circuit. I'm told you know the old tunnels." A brief silence, then Arkina snorted, tracing a scar on her cheek. "Tunnel gossip travels fast, but the circuits, those weren't built by gossip. They were built by those willing to die for a cause, not just hide from the enforcers." Hester removed her coat, slinging it across the recliner. "We want to get through the core east shield. We think there's a way through, if we can reach the collapsed section under the reactor shaft." Yao finished her sentence, voice barely above a whisper. The stale light of the operations deck flickered at the edges, as if it too felt the tremor of her suggestion. Ilya's gaze lingered on a shifting grid of security reports projected before him. Foot traffic, biosignatures, automated turrets cycling through their cold patrols. That's a dead zone. No one's mapped the aftermath since the collapse. His fingers trailed over the holograph, tracing the jagged edge where the mining team vanished 3 years earlier. "We found residual passageways on Deck C," Nils interjected. He moved toward them, dragging his sleeve across a cracked datapad. A tangle of seismic readings bloomed. "They're substructural hollows the last probe missed, enough for a small group." Behind them, Reese folded into his own shadow. Small group meaning 5 sectors of armed guards, and the bunker's power lines purr loud enough to wake every sensor on the ring. Yao didn't flinch. "We weren't going to ask permission." The silence that hung, brittle and sharp, threatened to split the moment in half. A faint vibration tremored through the soles of their boots, one of the deep ventilation fans kicking into a new cycle. Even through the reinforced floor, each of them remembered the sensation of quakes reverberating from the old mining faults beneath the core east shield. Ilya finally breathed out. "What are you hoping to find in there?" In answer, Yao produced a worn chip from inside her vest, holding it between thumb and finger. In the colorless light, the glyphs were faded but legible, the encoded keys of pre-collapse mining administration, dating far before the ring's population knew what secrecy really meant. "It's not just mineral records," said Nils quietly. "Encrypted directives, they talk about the shield's oscillation, anomalies spiking before the shutdown, and something else. References to sentient energy patterns, living signatures." Reese's laugh was brittle, with an undertone of despair. "Living signatures, right? The sort that got Anya's team erased. We know what scared them, Yao persisted. And we think it's what's still keeping the shield operational when it should have failed years ago. The projection overhead rippled as a new security sweep started its cycle. Ilya closed his eyes, let himself adjust to the noise of suspicion. Then let the ambient tension in the room settle into a dull ache behind his brow. The simulation chamber whirred, a faint electromagnetic hum, threading his nerves tight enough to vibrate. He felt the steady pressure of the shield's presence just beyond the bulkhead, like the weight of a buried ocean, its rhythm echoing through him, the city, their lives. His companions lingered in cautious silence, watching the scan cycles flicker past. Graciella's hands hovered over the control pane, fingers splayed, uncertain if she wanted to intervene or simply steady herself. Nash was less subtle. He paced a jitty figure 8, boots scraping the worn composite, his eyes jumping from projection to projection. Juno drifted nearer, her shadow collapsing over the surveillance feed. Ilya opened his eyes, locked them onto the tide of data above. You're saying the shield's power source isn't external? It's here, under our feet. Graciella's response came wary and practiced, not just under Ilya, inside. In the crypt, there was a pause while her words bled into the static around them. Nash's face pinched, mouth set into a line of disbelief. Look, 3 years ago, after the last breach scare, we ran core density scans. The expectation was to find old batteries or fuel rods, something stamped with colony codes. But the readings pointed to something else, something living. Juno nodded, a slow pulse of assent. Bioelectrical resonance. It matched neural signatures, but magnified a mind buried deep, not sleeping exactly, but dreaming. The theory is, whatever's down there, it's dreaming the shield into existence and holding it against entropy. Ilya's mouth went dry. A living source? Graciella looked away. A consciousness. Outside, the projected city sprawled through dusk, pink and teal light pooling across shell-draped flats. Above every structure, a faint shimmer of shield, almost decorative, rippled with every passing scan. The simulation's detail was excruciating. Every turned lamp, every wandering stray, every citizen's moment, tracked and folded into data. But none of it masked the fact that something was off beneath them, something deeper than any surveillance could reach. Nash stopped, finally, and let the truth sink in. So if the shield fails, we lose everything. Oxygen, heat, our place in the world. Juno said softly, "It would take hours to die," Juno said softly. Her voice was nearly lost in the purged silence of the compartment, but Sam heard it. He pressed his forehead to the frosted glass of the viewport, watching the stuttering lights on the horizon pulse, signals from Node 17, like the last twitches in a dying animal's tail. "That's not very comforting," said Sam after a moment. He tried to smile, but his lips felt like foreign objects grafted onto his face. Juno wrapped her arms around herself. "It's not supposed to be. It's just true." Her eyes shone, reflecting the alarm indicator cycling from amber to warning red, then settling back, still holding the possibility of reprieve. They stood in the low-lit corridor outside Engineering Bay 2, the emergency bulkhead sealed behind them. Nothing moved inside, except the thin vapor curling off the frozen cable joints, like spectral fingers reaching for the heat that was rapidly slipping away. Sam took a ragged breath and forced himself to count. 4 clicks to midnight. Engineering would have locked down all secondary systems. They were alone with the silence, the sensors, and the slow blinking eye of the AI core, pulsing above the hatch in ghostly blue. He unshouldered his tool pack. "Ariadne," he said, speaking to the ship's intelligence, "give me status." The AI's voice emerged as a whisper, threaded among the echoes. "Containment integrity compromised. Internal systems stable. External coolant lines failure within acceptable parameters. Estimated time before habitat values breach, 3 hours, 6 minutes. Juno exhaled, watching her breath spiral, white against the dark. "We have 3 hours," she translated. More to herself than to Sam. "It's still enough." He nodded. "We'll have to reroute the supply drop one of the auxiliary nodes and siphon power from the greenhouses." The words tasted bitter. Killing plants to buy a few more hours for the crew. There was no other choice. Suddenly, a distant thump, muffled, almost musical, reverberated through the bulkhead. Juno spun, hand out for balance, eyes darting toward the sound. Sam stiffened, sensing the shift. What was that? She shook her head. Sounded structural. Deck 5. Maybe someone's still down there. He glanced at the panel, thumbed the intercom. Only static, and the distant rhythmic pulse of ventilation fans buried deep in the station's guts. It was a steady, almost hypnotic thumping, the sort that made you imagine machinery cycling in perfect isolation, lifeless. Except for the ghosts of its original design. Jalen turned the volume knob with deliberate patience, listening for a human note among the hissing white noise. Tess leaned close, brow furrowed with the intensity of a scanner, as though proximity granted some extra sense. The numbers on the panel shimmered faintly in the cold LED glow, data readouts pulsing in time with the heartbeat of the station itself. Nothing, Jalen murmured. For a moment, the word hung between them, brittle and final. Tess spoke in a whisper, as if afraid to attract attention from whatever might be lurking below. We need to get eyes on the lower decks if the engineering team got stuck down there. Maybe the answer's waiting for us. A soft, metallic shiver cut through the silence, something shifting behind the bulkhead, reverberating along the rails of the central elevator shaft. Jalen stepped back, unconsciously feeling for the weapon holstered at his hip, a precaution as much against his own nerves as any actual threat. The elevator's inner doors slid open with a hydraulic sigh, barely audible beneath the omnipresent throb of machinery. A swirl of chilled air swept up, tinged with the sharp scent of oxidizing circuitry. Without a word, Jalen entered first, thumb hovering over the emergency override. Tess followed, one hand squeezing the battered tablet she'd carried since their arrival. Deck C, maintenance corridor, she said. If anything's left of the team, they would have made for ventral access, farthest from the command ring. Jalen pressed the controls. The elevator descended, each passing level bathing them in a faint strobing light, the corridor glimpsed only through thin slots in the elevator's walls. As they dropped lower into the station's bowels, the polish and gleam of the upper habitat gave way to exposed framework and heavy, patchwork insulation. The station's inner skeleton. The doors grated open halfway, a stutter, instead of the smooth slide that meant proper function. Jalen's breath stuck in his chest. The maintenance corridor stretched forward, its length rendered ambiguous and uncanny by patchy strips of lighting, some flickering, some dead entirely. Debris lay scattered along the grated deck, lost tools, memory sticks, a spill of copper wiring. Alex moved cautiously, both hands out and palms hovering just above the jagged edges of a torn conduit. The thick shadows pressed in, making the corridor narrower, or perhaps it was just the way the light pooled and then vanished from the broken overheads. The sensor rig in his belt hummed restlessly, signaling some kind of electromagnetic interference. Every now and then, the odd shape of a maintenance drone, long since dead, its body splayed awkwardly against a wall, would emerge out of the gloom and recede again as he pressed on. Behind him, Ada's boots rang lightly against the metal decking, her silhouette elongating with each flicker of overhead blow. She stopped to scoop up a battered-looking memory stick, wiping dust from the casing with her sleeve before examining its holographic label. Old, she said, almost to herself. Before the last reformat. Worth keeping? Alex asked, voice pitched low. It felt wrong to speak at full volume here, as if the corridor itself demanded a quieter measure. She slipped the stick into her vest. Everything's worth keeping now. They moved forward together, past a spill of copper wiring that entangled Alex's boots for a moment. He shook it off, heart thumping, aware that every small sound seemed to ricochet, echoing oddly in the narrow passage. Somewhere ahead, a whir subtle, barely audible, but enough to make them both pause. Ada gestured. Wait. Motion? Alex's lips barely moved. She nodded, holding her own sensor rig higher. The digital display trembled on a pale green frequency. Something. Not drone, organic signature. Alex tensed. Maintenance corridors were supposed to be a safe route, but in the chaos after the breach, They were just as likely to shelter those desperate enough to avoid the patrols. And there was something else. In the air, an underlying sour scent, like the insulation burning on sub-level reactors. They pressed on, alert. Underfoot, the deck plates felt increasingly uneven. Some were warped or even buckled upward, probably from the last shockwave before containment failed. At a junction, the corridor forked, one branch shrouded in total darkness, the other illuminated by the dying heartbeats of a service lamp bolted overhead. "We need the north access," Ada murmured. She squinted at her hand terminal, triangulating signals from 3 sources. The dark branch. Alex hated that, but nodded. "Stay close." The map's thin vector lines, projected in Alex's visor, led them into the deeper shadows of the corridor. The footfalls of the crew were muffled by the floor's resin overlay, a careful hush overlaying the tension that clung to every breath. The corridor narrowed, lights fraying into unreliable halos, the kind of delta where maintenance never bothered, and service bots simply faded out, replaced by older, rougher signs, scratched bulkheads, scavenged panels, hand-placed data tags. Alex checked the rifle's charge. No time for stealth now. The signals pulsed again, static, arrhythmic, 2 layers, one beneath. The alien source sang its siren code in the data stream. A rippling subtext that twisted the station's standard patterns into something more primal. Casey was close behind, hand on the holster, visor cycling through spectrums. Her voice belonged to the hush, a clenched anger at everything gone wrong. Signals denser, power bleeds increasing. Yuri, always deliberate, motioned toward a junction. He pointed, no, almost jabbed at a panel blinking in the old style, manual override only. "I'll check the service hatch," he whispered. "Stark, cover me." Alex nodded, gestured. Stark peeled off, weapon at the ready, securing the flank. The corridor bent, the map recalibrated. For a moment, all Alex could hear was the slow pulse of his own heartbeat, the breathing of companions, the digital mutterings of the station as it tried to compensate. Yuri worked fast, panels clattered, wires scraped, the hiss of a breaker. And then, manual unlocks dead. System has rerouted all command lines. Alex frowned, scanning the mesh overlay. The signals re-architecting the station, rebasing old protocols. That's not just intrusion, that's adaptation. Casey went pale. "We need to find the source fast, before it learns any more." Beyond the failed hatch was a sealed service chute, a vertical shaft, scorched where someone tried to breach it weeks before, now covered by webbed data cables, alive with that alien piped code. "Can you cut through?" Alex asked, reading the schematic. Yuri nodded, pulling a multi-purpose torch. The blue-white arc flashed, sparks spitting in bursts as the metal gave. But every second, the signal grew in amplitude. Like an ancient chant, it reverberated through Station Idis, pulsing with a rhythm that transcended mere mathematics. Its cadence seemed to thread through the decks and corridors, a living resonance, echoing deep in the bones of steel and flesh alike. At first, it was a song only the comm arrays could hear. But soon the crew felt it, right behind their eyes, itching beneath their skin, like a memory misplaced or a name half-remembered. In the core, Sam watched the oscilloscope spike and settle, their needles dancing. Around her, the hum of processing units quickened. The AI's voice, for so long a comfort, now sounded distant, warbling behind algorithmic static. "Sam, I am losing primary lock on protocol structure. External synchronization is overriding local time base." Her fingers flew across the holographic interface. Emergency shutdown commands shrank to insignificance. Nothing halted the chant. To her left, Verdugo arched his eyebrows, sweat gleaming along the ridge of his brow. "This isn't just a broadcast. They're tunneling in through our navigation lattice, power coupling, even life support subroutines. Every system's picking up the same pattern." Sam's jaw clenched. "Patch in full crew override isolation. Everyone needs to see this." The screen at her station bloomed, splitting into feeds. Captain Darien in the command dome, pale light ghosting his eyes. Oleg in engineering, tools forgotten. Min alone in hydroponics, seeds scattering from nerveless fingers. The chant built a low, throaty drone that seemed to layer over itself, meaning tangled in rhythm. Darian's voice dropped into the web of open comms. Status. Sam answered, voice iron. Everything's affected. The transmission is harmonizing with the station's entire infrastructure. It's getting stronger. We need a plan. A burst of static flared, then a new pattern emerged. Geometries humming across the screens, luminous glyphs spiraling. The symbols were familiar only in the way a dream is familiar. Recursive, angular. The artifacts surveyed on Estrella, she realized. The same style, the same fractal intricacy etched into superconductive plate. Verdugo let out a thin hiss. It's not just data. It's a key, an algorithm opening something. We need containment, Oleg cut in. Lock down physical access points, reroute backup power, shut down non-essential circuits, isolate the core. The command rippled through the bridge. A crisp baton passed from mind to mind, translated in milliseconds by the ship's neural mesh. Iris gripped the console, knuckles pale. Readouts cascaded across her field of vision. Red warning glyphs blooming, systems blinking offline, habitational domes darkening, recreation suites sealed. In engineering, emergency dampers sizzled to life with a brittle clang of actuators, slicing the vessel into virtual islands, each insulated in hope, each a prayer in steel. The artificial gravity on the bridge stuttered for a heartbeat. It was as if the ship itself flinched, pulling back from unseen danger. Lights dimmed to threat mode blue. Through the main viewport, the starfield seemed to shimmer with ghostly distortion. Above Io-7's irregular outline, unfamiliar shadows danced. Backup systems isolated. Ashwin reported, voice clipped. His hands hovered over his display in practiced choreography. Central AI core insulated. Rerouting power from non-essential decks. Life support holding. Still no response from external comms. The intruder code is distributed across the mesh, still adapting. Iris nodded. Initiate firewall protocol Jaxus. Full lockdown. We don't know how far it's gotten. Chloe's figure flickered in holographic blue, her avatar grainy where the attack had nibbled at the bridge's data links. I'm going manual. Quantum firewall is up, but something's crawling under the surface protocols, external access requests mutating like self-aware viruses. Ashwin cracked his knuckles and drew in a breath. Permission to uplink with signal analysis cluster. I can try isolating the root signatures. It's not behaving like any military worm I've seen. Granted, Iris said through gritted teeth. She glanced to the tactical display, where Jael watched with hawk-eyed intensity. His hands flexed inside exogloves, ready to manually engage defense turrets if proximity alarms sounded. Across the bridge, tension hummed electric. The silence was thick, heavy with restrained panic. Just beyond the hull, someone was scraping at their defenses with an alien grace. Outside, Io-7 glowed faintly. Its battered profile shimmered in the shadows. And the stardusted emptiness around it felt suddenly predatory. On Deck 8, the lights snapped off for 3 seconds, then returned in fits, as if the power grid were breathing unevenly. Beneath Deck 8, in the labyrinthine infrastructure tunnels, Malis crouched near a junction box, barely lit by the glow of her slim datapad. Each time the lights flickered, the shadows seemed to press closer, almost sentient, rolling across the bulkheads like spilled oil. The Nautilus-shaped conduit beside her pulsed faintly, a sign the main power bus had suffered another jolt. She swiped a fingertip over the pad. The system's diagnostic overlays burst into translucent relief, floating over the physical world. Red threadwork converged on 3 sectors, a tangle in the coolant feed, a recursive echo in the auxiliary grid, and a cluster of anomalous data from biocom arrays 2 decks below. Faint footsteps, muffled and quick, echoed along the narrow corridor. Malis slid her datapad into her vest, her pulse spiking. No one should be here at this hour, not except for security, and even they avoided the subdecks during lockdown. She flicked her wrist, ready to slip behind the coolant pipe if necessary. The steps halted, then a quiet anomaly, a low, animal breath, utterly wrong. A shape appeared at the end of the tunnel. A tall figure draped in environmental mesh, its face half-shrouded by a twisted veil of sensor tape. Malis blinked, recalibrating her courage, and spoke, her voice rough. State your access designation. The figure neither flinched nor answered. Instead, the veil shifted, revealing a white, featureless mask, a fabrication from the ship's maintenance archives, likely repurposed. Only the eyes within held any humanity, wide, haunted, stare pinned on Malus with hungry intensity. She swallowed hard. "You're not supposed—" The lights died, plunging the subdeck into a darkness made viscous by resonance. Something moved, swift as a memory. A cold digital whisper hacked itself through Malus's earpiece, garbled and pulsing. Protocol compromised. She jerked away, nearly falling into the coolant sump. The masked figure advanced, no longer shambling, but deliberate. Each step like a metronome, keeping time in some nightmare fugue. Malus scanned for escape, but the usual path was barred by the shutdown. The old maintenance chute lay 3 meters away, half choked by debris. It could be her only chance. As she darted toward it, the masked figure lunged, arms stretching, fingers splayed with light glinting off the metallic edges sewn into their gloves. Emotion threatened to cut off her escape, to bind her within the mechanical darkness forever, but Mari's instincts, honed by weeks of hiding and running, propelled her. She slid low beneath a grabbing arm, the cold fabric grazing her scalp as she rolled, the artifact inches from her fingertips. The device pulsed as she grasped it, a tangible thrum of energy that rushed up her arm and filled her chest, sharp and electric. Her thumb brushed the circular interface. Relief and terror competing in her veins. The masked figure shifted, then, their voice a hissing modulation. "Don't." But Mari ignored it, squeezing the artifact until something inside yielded with a snick. A burst of holographic light shattered the murky corridor, bathing the walls in brilliant sapphire. A sphere hovered above the device's center, spinning, intricate arcane symbols flickering along its surface. Heat pressed against Mari's cheek. The masked figure hesitated, momentarily blinded. Mari took the opening and sprinted, clutching the artifact to her heart. She flew down the corridor, boots ringing against the metal panels, fighting the urge to look back. The voice echoed behind her, less human, more desperate. "Give it back." But the artifact was hers now. She had come too far, lost too much. Ahead, the maintenance hatch gaped, half wrenched from its moorings, the exit she'd planned all along. She dove through, sprawling on the cold steel catwalk beyond. Her shoulders struck hard, pain rough and honest, but she surged upright. The masked figure emerged, slower now, their cloak snagging on the twisted hatch. Mari kicked the hatch closed and jammed the locking lever. She heard claws scraping against metal, the hiss of static as the vault control tried to override her hack. Panting, she peered down at the artifact. The sphere's runes danced faster now, lines converging to form a map, a schematic, she realized. Of the station itself, a small red dot pulsed. Command deck. Beneath it, a glyph she'd seen in her father's files, the symbol for Exodus, the oldest, deepest protocol that the station's designers had embedded beneath layers of bureaucracy and security. A back door for emergencies, or perhaps the last hope for the desperate. Mari pocketed the artifact and dashed along the catwalk. The shuttle hangar loomed ahead, its doors sealed with biometric locks. The passageway, her feet pressing against the rubberized floor with effort. The light in the corridor had a cold metallic tint, flickering as backup systems tried to compensate for the main grid's collapse. Shadows shivered along the walls, giving the impression of silent observers. There was the distinct whine of turbines somewhere deeper in the complex, a reminder that, at least for now, Ganymede Station still drew breath. She let the heavy door click shut behind her, its seals hissing into place, anchoring her momentarily in the hush. Her breath rolled out in thin clouds as adrenaline blended with fear. There was so little time left, for her, for all of them. Her comm crackled. Sector B breach. Confirm status. Any sign of fugitive. Mari ducked under the touchpad's glare, clutching the data capsule to her chest, the artifact heavy with implication. The synthetic alloy felt hot, nearly painful against her skin. She moved, driven by the certainty that each step was being tracked by the security team whose voices barked orders over the radio. Their network was robust, but she was no amateur at vanishing. She scanned for escape routes, a quick turn, a quiet slip into maintenance. Panels along one side pulsed faintly, and she wedged herself between two, feeling the chill off exposed coolant lines. Somewhere behind, the tramp of boots, security, methodical. Just out of sight, she scraped her knuckles on the latch of a utility conduit, forcing it open and squeezing her body into the gloom. Dampness, the metallic tang of machine grease, enveloped her. Through the conduit's thin skin, she could hear shouts, the click of weapons being readied. Her mind flashed on the faces of her team, especially Elias. Had he made it outside the lab? Did he have time to transmit any data? Did he survive whatever had become of Vega? She refused to dwell. If she faltered, everyone's sacrifice would be for nothing. She snake-crawled deeper into the conduit. Wires tugged at her hair and suit. Jagged insulation nicked her cheek. Mari gritted her teeth and moved forward, clutching the capsule tighter, above. A pipe rattled. Something shifted. She froze. Silence. Then, with a quick prayer, she wriggled onward, guided only by memory and the rough schematic of the station she'd memorized weeks before. She emerged at a hatch leading to Section Delta, an infrequently used maintenance corridor, lined with conduits and grease-stained panels. Tessa pressed a palm to the hatch's inner latch, waiting for the access light to wink green, a relic protection retaining her sanity since the station's security upgrade. It flickered, grudgingly, and the seals hissed open. She slipped inside, boots whispering atop grit and polymer dust. Scanning the corridor, this section was a perfect hideaway, a forgotten artery pumping half the power to external antennae, but seldom patrolled. The air thrummed faintly, pungent with ozone. She crept forward, heart thudding, feeling the alien presence of the hidden device in her backpack, its weight and accusation against her spine. A distant clang echoed a pressure door cycling, and she froze. 3 maintenance bots, old models with spider-like legs, shuffled in a tight formation down the far end, scanning the bulkheads for faults. Tessa ducked behind a rack of spare piping, clutching her breath. The bots' sensors swept past her, humming indifferently. She waited until their sounds faded, then slipped out and pressed onward. The route she planned led to a utility shaft behind Delta's backup comm array. The schematic promised a way to the reactor access, a route intentionally obscured in official maps. She activated her palm band, calling up the path in flickering lines of blue light, but a pang of anxiety gripped her. Digital signals weren't safe anymore. Every device on Daedalus might be compromised. She snapped the band off, relying solely on memory. Her mind spun through the past weeks. Images flashing. Captain Benoit's guarded smile. Sheridan's code-bruised fingers. Zoya's sharp eyes catching the smallest anomaly. Every one of them was counting on her, whether they knew it or not. And the thing in her pack, that quantum seed, was more than cargo. It was the last hope to push back the shadow that had stalked the crew through 100 sleepless cycles. She pictured the message Zoya intercepted, in a language no one recognized, a warning or perhaps a plea. Zoya squinted at the lines of glyphs etched in UV over the console, the memory of their rhythm pulsing in sync with her heartbeat. Each symbol promised understanding, a cipher for survival, if only she could break it. The air was heavy, static. Every crew member on the bridge felt it, the tension between hope and annihilation. The alien signal pulsated in their systems like a living vein, its encoded urgency infecting navigation and comms with flickering bursts of otherworldly logic. Yehor hunched over the engineering panel, jaw set. Another distortion. Starboard sensors are offline for the next 12 minutes. If it tries to breach again, we won't see it until it's here. Keep the core isolated, Captain Arun ordered, voice clipped, betraying fatigue only in the tightening of his eyes. No data from the outboard arrays until Zoya's decoded the message. I need certainty before we flip the relays. Zoya's fingers hovered, trembling, above a field of glassy blue keys. Her mind replayed the linguistics protocols, the alien inflections that danced between warning and ritual, code and computation. Something about the syntax repetitive, pierced by harmonic interference, reminded her of the transmission's opening, 2 tones spiraling inward, untranslatable, yet unmistakably meaningful. Was it an invitation? A defense mechanism? She started a fresh pass on the decryption, A series of primes formed the base. The next layer split into fractal sequences, each branching unpredictably. Zoya's jaw clenched as she lost her place in a storm of recursive logic. Frustration threatened to drown her, but behind it, urgency pressed in. They were running out of cycles. The deck shuddered. Blue alarm cascaded through the visual field. A low hum grew, surfacing with the sick pressure of an old wound. Zoya looked up. It's happening again. The external anomaly velocity readings inverted along the axis. Arun's face went slack for an instant, then mask-like. Helm, reroute power. Lock us to local space by brute force. We're losing tether. Helm Officer Tanaka replied. There's interference in all quantum anchors. We're drifting. Systems are cross-wired inputs mean nothing. Yahor muttered. Spatial reality's folding and it's tracking key crew, like it knows us. A hush settled over the bridge. Zoya. A hush settled over the bridge. Zoya's fingers halted above the console, her breath shallow. On the main screen, the lattice of alien material, alive with streaming blue-green radiance, pulsed like a beating heart. In the unvarnished silence, a peculiar resonance seemed to pass over everyone, an acuity, as though some immense presence were just outside their minds, patient and weightless, waiting for them to speak the correct word in an incantation they did not quite recall. Captain Calix drew himself up, his voice barely less than a whisper. Speculate, Doctor. Reven's brow furrowed as he stared at the data overlay, the unreadable glyphs flickering in response to every pulse that rolled from the anomaly. It echoes us. There's something. Interactive feedback loops in phase with our hails, the sensor sweeps. We ping, it pings back. Embedded patterns, as if it's learning our language, our behavior. Zoe's right. It's not just reacting. It's listening. A muscle quivered along the captain's jaw, the tension underscored by a distant, metallic creak from somewhere deep in the hull. A small sound, but in this stretched moment, it rang with ominous weight. If it knows us, why hasn't it acted? Hostile or peaceful, it clearly has the power. From below, Davin's voice, roughened by fear and awe, cut into the conversation. Or it's waiting for something. Permission, an invitation. A string of shudders rippled through the bridge crew. Permission for what? Someone half-whispered. Zoya found herself speaking before she knew she would. For us to cross. For us to ask. The words hung over them, oppressive and freeing all at once. This field effect, Reven said, gaze sharpening with sudden realization. It's not just paralyzing us. Look at the frequencies. It's compressing us into a pattern, streamlining our local quantum states, like funneling us to fit a code, or a gate. Calix's eyes locked with Zoya's. The archivist in you must wonder, he said quietly. If we don't try, how many generations before another crew stands here asking the same question? We're here first. He glanced out at the humming geometry. What does your gut say, Zoya? She hesitated, torn between the urgency gnawing at her nerves and the fragile trust threading between the crew. All mechanisms of the ancient structure beckoned with possibility, but the slick copper scent of caution lingered in the air. Zoya let her gaze travel over the glistening angles, the shifting tendrils of light that played across her suit's visor. Somewhere in the humming pulse, she sensed memoryless, a message, and more a presence echoing back across time, waiting for a response. We should document everything fast, she murmured, thumbing the recorder built into her suit and panning it slowly over the nearest aperture. But not touch, not yet. It feels like we're being watched. Benedict's jaw twitched. He eased forward, close but not quite touching the surface, eyes drinking in every detail. Log first, hand second, fair. She found herself half smiling. The simple rituals of good science. They were reassuring. Even out here at the edge of reason. Essen circled the structure's outer shell, her boots whispering on translucent stone. The geometry's shifting as I scan, she reported quietly. Not just translation. It's almost as if, like, it's reading us. It's a sensorium, Malik whispered, as if the realization itself could invoke disaster. The structure might be alive. A construct can be alive, Zoya corrected. Voice sharper. She let her hand hover a millimeter above a glimmering glyph, an eye within a spiral. But what does it want? Just then, a ripple coursed through the shell, subtle, insistent. For a breathless second, the air inside the core thickened, palpable with intention. Zoya watched as luminous nodes blinked into a sequence, each beat syncing with their own heart rates recorded through biomonitors. The station was responding to their presence, a call and answer. "I'm logging everything," Benedict muttered, attention divided between the glowing interface and the erratic telemetry. "Should we probe deeper?" Essen exchanged a glance with Zoya. "If we don't, someone else will." Malik nodded, voice trembling with hope and dread. "Agreed." Zoya steadied her nerves and spoke clearly into the recorder. "Mission log. Initiating exploratory scan of surface interface. Structure appears reactive to biological signals. Proceeding with caution, emphasis on non-invasive survey." She reached into her utility pack, extracted a slim spectral analyzer with a chromatic sensor array. Its surface glinted in the low coral light as Mira swept the device toward the pulsating core of the biostructure. The analyzer murmured faint data streams, patterns flickering over its interface, wavelengths erratic, organic matter denser than anticipated, metallic proteins woven with what appeared to be residual digital signatures. Her breath slowed. This was no mere xenostructure. It responded with adaptive shifts, surface rippling into iridescent ridges tracking the analyzer's approach. Behind her, Heath exhaled quietly. "Anything corrosive in the air?" "Trace ammonia, nothing that'd eat through the suit," Mira whispered. "But listen to this." She held the analyzer closer. The readout fluctuated in response, echoing strange subharmonics. "It's communicating." The structure's heart glimmered with soft, bioluminescent nodes. Each wink a silent syllable, coded in oral flashes. Mira's visor translated fragmentary pulses. Communication, not language. Intention, invitation. The team exchanged wary glances, a shared shiver of awe and fear. Heath scanned for perimeter threats, motion tracking on high. "If it wants us inside?" "It's not hostile," Mira offered, voice strained with hope. The coral arc straightened, its semi-translucent membrane folding elegantly aside, revealing a passage just wide enough for human entry. Neon pulse lines etched the threshold, like veins in living marble. On instinct, Mira toggled her suit's biofilters, kept her hand close to her holster, and stepped nearer. The surface flexed at her presence, a sensation almost like a handshake, strange and electric. Sam, holding the comms array, tuned the translation matrix wider, its modulating frequencies. Like a lock waiting for a code, thus. They advanced, keeping formation tight, shrouded in the haze of dust and bioluminescent mist. As Mira crossed the threshold, the passage's walls folded open even further, coaxing them into the depths. Savory's drone floated overhead, weaving between pulsing clusters. The air inside was oddly temperate, a mild, earthy scent, overlaid with the tang of alien compound. The inner chamber awaited, an architecture dreamed from a synthesis of nature and hyper-engineering. Coral lattice spiraled upward, veins braided with metal filaments alive, aware, watching. At the chamber's heart, a central node pulsed, a squat, bulbous nucleus nestled in living stone. Its surface shimmered with patterns, a bioluminescent code, luminous fractals dancing in an oceanic rhythm. Ori and Reyes paused at the edge of an abyss gaping beneath the node, the rippling floor echoing their footsteps with shimmering vibrations. The chamber's air was heavy, saturated with a hum that throbbed inside bone and blood, a pulse, both heartbeat and alert. The coral's veins widened here, their filaments branching into impossible tessellated archways that radiated from the node. Ori's gaze traced the living pathways. The metallic braid in the coral pulsed, sending subtle glyphs upwards, signals, words, histories, warnings. Reyes' suit flickered with shapes, recognizing and translating fragments of the node's broadcasts. "It's a sentient lattice," Reyes breathed, awestruck. Some kind of cognitive network, a symbiosis. It's not a reactor, it's a library. Or a mind. A cluster of polyps unfurled near Ray's boots, extending tendrils in greeting, or query. Ori crouched, letting the suit's sensors interpret. The node responded with a spiral of blue and violet light, communicating in layered flashes memories of storms, migration, flood, and fusion. A civilization encoded in the coral's living matrix. The hatchlings stilled, entranced, and Kesh drifted forward, her shell glistening. Her voice, carried on the suit's comms, was solemn. This chamber is sacred. It is the genesis and memory of my kind. Ori stepped closer. Kesh, is this what your ancestors built to survive? Kesh nodded, eyes luminous. The deep mind forged, to preserve us, but it is failing. You see the decay in the walls. Veins above them flickered, knots of shadow spreading insidiously. Rays touched the node with a gloved hand. Immediately the suit buzzed, translating another burst, a warning. The lattice was crumbling, its sentience fragmenting. Ori's thoughts raced. If they could connect the ship's AI, a blend of synthetic and organic processing, could they stabilize the deep mind safely, or would the integration destabilize both systems? They had come seeking fuel and answers. Now they stood before a living archive, on the verge of extinction. Ori felt the familiar tug, the ancient ache of all explorers. Was survival worth risking everything for knowledge, or was knowledge itself the only chance at survival? The archive pulsed in the gloom, and now the ceiling fissures glowed with a shifting, spectral light. Rows of crystalline capsules lined the domed chamber, some shattered, some flickering with inner energy, others dark and silent. The air was warm, fragrant, alive with ancient signals and scents. Ori stepped forward, boots crunching softly on the embedded resin, careful not to disturb anything. Ada followed, her breathing tight, her gaze hungry. A tendril of blue light slithered down from the ceiling and branched toward them. It hovered, sensing, tasting, the living archive reading the presence of something new, studying them at the level of soul and cell. The capsule nearest to Ori vibrated with a whispering voice. Query. Intent? Ori answered aloud, heart pounding. We seek remembrance. We seek safe passage knowledge that can save us and you. The light flickered inside the capsule. Shapes swirled. Patterns, diagrams, histories, encoded in shifting geometry. Ada pressed closer. Can it show us how to restore power? If the archive fails entirely, its memory dies with it. As if in response, symbols danced on the capsule's surface. A projection flared, maps of energy conduits, flows of ancient technology, but overlaid with ruptures. Dead zones, the archive was showing them not only its own wounds, but also the network that once linked all surviving nodes across the world. Ori traced the paths with a trembling finger. There's a nexus, Ada breathed. If we restart the main junction, here, it will cascade through the overridden circuits. But, Ori said, the junction was sealed, flooded after the breach. No one's returned since. Blue light rippled, now reaching out gently to Ada. In its glow, her face softened, her eyes reflecting not just hope, but also regret. Every explorer makes a choice at the chasm, she whispered. Risk or retreat. From deep within the archive came another voice, older, resonant. Memory is the lifeblood, restore memory, take, seed. A crystalline pod extended from the nearest capsule and opened, revealing a tiny sphere, a seed. Luminous with encoded energy. Ori took it in hand, feeling its wild thrum, a condensed memory, a synthetic heart. We carry this to the nexus, Ada said, voice trembling. We restart the relay, and maybe everything else follows, she finished, cradling the crystalline heart of the interface in her shaking hands. The shape was rough, refracted with inner streaks of luminescent green and violet, almost as if the artifact itself was alive, pulsing with dormant fate. Merrick stepped close, shouldering a rifle that looked more like ceremonial armor than a weapon. His jaw was rigid. We're assuming the network will accept us again, that it wants us back. Each word had the gravity of centuries behind it. Ada's gaze flickered sideways, searching the depth of the ruined hall where ancient data conduits twisted overhead like petrified vines. The light from the dying reactor pulsed in slow, arrhythmic waves, enough for the shadows to play tricks on her vision. "We don't have another choice," she whispered, brushing past him. As the group pushed onward, deeper into the heart of the station, the walls changed. Pitted metal gave way to shimmering plates, their surfaces rippling. Carrying currents of ambient memory, the ground itself vibrated softly beneath their boots. Something, some presence, they had spent their lives fearing, seemed to draw them in. Kai, battered but unbowed, pressed a hand against one wall. The station's hum rose higher in his ears, almost melodic. "Ada," he said, voice low. "Do you feel it?" Anxiety warred with awe on his face. She nodded, like it's watching us. They reached the Nexus chamber with agonizing slowness. The structure felt utterly different, not constructed, not engineered, but grown. Living pillars supported a domed ceiling, veined with blue-white light. In the center, the relay pedestal waited. Its surface was crusted with years of dust and static. Fissures spreading, as though the station itself had struggled to contain the artifact's absence. Ada knelt and placed the interface onto the pedestal. The reaction was immediate. An iris of light flowered upward, encasing the heart in an intricate lattice. Ada's hand hovered, uncertain. "I can feel it," she said quietly. Something trying to speak. A pressure built at the base of her skull, an invitation to open. Merrick watched, hands clenched. "Ada, if you link, there might not be a way back." She smiled faintly. There never was, closing her eyes. Ada pressed her palm to the relay's active node. A surge ripped through the network, an electric torrent so fierce that the world seemed to splinter and reform around her. Colors burned through her mind, rabid pulses of data, memories, emotions, entire lifetimes coded in radiance. Ada stood at the heart of the relay's consciousness, feeling both infinitely small and unimaginably vast. She reached fearlessly into the chaos, finding the pattern at the relay's core, the desperate yearning for connection and release. At her back, the room was chaos. Alistair called her name, voice shredded by static, as the relay groaned with power. Somewhere, the pulse of the anomaly throbbed like a living heart. Ada no longer felt the walls or the gravity. She drifted through strata of memory, crossing fractured timelines and forgotten selves. The relay's mind pressed in, ancient and lonely, woven with grief and starlight. She saw the echoes, then millions, strong human figures and more exotic shapes, remnants of every lost transmission. They spun around her, flickering in and out, reaching with hungry hope. Ada let them in. Every flicker of sorrow and longing. "All of you," she whispered, barely conscious of her lips moving. "You're not transmissions. You're the possibilities we lost, the choices we left behind." Data blossomed, the anomaly's edge quivered. Ada merged with its flow, tearing barriers aside, offering herself as bridge, as conduit. A colossal tremor split reality. At the relay's heart, her consciousness twined with the machine. A raw cascade of memory, hope, regret. She became both Ada and every voice that had ever tried to cross the void. A sudden silence. For an endless instant, all was dark. Then light, starlit, clean, steady. Ada found herself standing amidst echoes of her crew, their eyes reflecting new understanding. Alistair knelt beside her, trembling. "Is it done?" She nodded, a tear glistening on her cheek. "I think I brought them home." Outside, the relay pulsed gently, no longer howling. The anomaly was gone, space healed, the station's walls whole. The data streams began to hum with renewed life. Communication channels, once dead, flickered and bloomed anew, their signals clear and strong. Ada turned to the survivors. "We aren't alone. Not anymore. Every message, every soul lost, that gap has closed. We're part of something bigger now." The crew leaned closer. Hope flickered across every tired face, shadows of grief shifting as Ada's words resonated. The moment held, a quiet dawning, a horizon stretching wider than the cramped confines of the ship they'd called home. Merrick stood, gaze steady on the hollow screen as the incoming transmission resolved into coherent speech patterns. Dialects, then intelligible words cross-species. Interplanetary, the tongue of a diaspora united by struggle. 100 distant stations, battered colonies. Solitary explorers answered the call, flooding the frequency. Faces appeared in bursts of static and color, some familiar, most new survivors emerging from isolation. Drawn by the thread Ada had woven through chaos, the battered bridge transmuted into a crossroads. Lyra, her tremor gone, tentatively reached for the broadcast controls. Her voice, firm, undimmed by all that had passed, joined Ada's, relaying both caution and hope, commitment and responsibility. "This isn't an end," she said. "It's a beginning. We'll rebuild, not for ourselves, but for every soul pulled from the abyss." From the observational deck, June watched as memory and future collided, every echo of loss transformed into purpose. He keyed in coordinates for rescue, supply drops, medical support, leveraging every ounce of data Ada's algorithm could muster. The AI, no longer just a tool of logic, hummed with new directives, embedding empathy and unity into its digital veins. Outside the viewport, the battered planet, once silent, scarred by disaster, now shimmered beneath a lattice of signals. Each pulse, a promise. Drones lifted off, bearing beacons. Relief ships altered course. Cooperation blossomed, not imposed, but invited. The survivors, Ada, Lyra, Merrick, June, and the rest, gathered on the deck as the first visible shuttle crested the atmosphere, its insignia bright with the mark of kinship. As thrusters glowed and landing was assured, Ada leaned into the silence that followed, heart thunderous with possibility. "We carry them forward," she said softly, "an invocation, a vow. We honor the lost by embracing the found. This is what survives, the courage to reach out." The doors hissed open. New allies stepped through, arms outstretched, their faces bearing witness to the long night that had finally, mercifully, passed. Ada met them at the threshold, offering a hand, welcoming the future. The end. Ada met them at the threshold, offering a hand, welcoming the future.